Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Demystifying Microsoft podcast. I'm Nathan Taylor, your host, and today I'm excited to be joined by Dom Kirby. How you doing, Dom?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm excited to have the conversation today. It's something you and I have been chatting about for a while, so it'll be fun to jump
It
into
is.
that. And today we're going to talk about keeping our kids safe online. It's good timing with back to school. It's a hot topic in my world because I got a 12-year-old and just trying to navigate the world of how do you take a small human and slowly introduce them to the insane world of the internet. But before we jump into the details, Dom, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and go from there?
Yeah. So I am today the Senior Director of Professional Services at Pax8. So I oversee an awesome team of engineers and project managers that implement stuff for our partners, including you guys. So very, very sizable, mature Microsoft practice. I'm rather proud of it. And then I do a lot of cybersecurity initiatives for myself and obviously for Pax8 around education and learning myself and growing that space and trying to raise the tide. And increasingly, like I am trying to get more at younger generations that are coming into a world that is different from the world you and I came into when we started working.
Oh
Right.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we were just talking, it's a world that's different than having a 12-year-old 2 years ago,
Right.
just legitimately moving quickly. So today is going to be a little less business focused. We're not going to be selling a whole lot today. We're not talking about Azure today. We're kind of taking a little detour and just talking about a topic that I think is critical for a lot of us. And honestly, it's a place that I end up kind of feeling, I don't have a lot of empathy. I have a lot of empathy for people because I'm a nerd. This is what we do for
Yeah.
professionally. I managed networks for years. Like I know this stuff. I live and breathe this stuff. Now maybe I don't manage, content filters for a living, but I'm technical, right? And I'm struggling with this, man. It's a tough challenge to solve. And I really feel for the people who are non-technical trying to cover for their kids. So I think sometimes one of the places that I think it's important for us to talk about before we get into kind of the nitty gritty details is like the why. What are we worried about when we're talking about these kids online? What are some of the things that come to mind for you, Don?
In cybersecurity in general, we're always trying to threat model, right? Because we understand what can happen, but we really need to understand what's likely to happen. And I think that's what's changed because it's a world where we absolutely must empower our kids to use and be good at technology, right? Like it doesn't matter what industry they're going to work in anymore.
Correct.
Your electrician pulls out a tablet to run your quotes, right, and do all of that digitally. So it really doesn't matter what you're doing. So you have to do that, right? And I think with AI, I also feel the need to teach my kids like how to properly and ethically and safely use AI, right, to their advantage because everyone else is, right, and that's going to be
Yeah.
important. But at the same time, like everything introduces new threats. You can go back as far as you want to the dawn of the internet, right? And adult content is obviously a massive thing that we all worry about, and
Mhm.
I've had firsthand sort of discussions where those discussions are had about the other threats of sort of predatory activity and all that stuff that keeps us up at night. And now we're also introducing this concept of chatbots and some of the riskier ones and the unfortunate outcomes that have happened there. These digital companion things that have come out of AI, which are super weird.
Yes.
But
Yes.
um, and like how do you navigate that uh, and protect them, like we're saying, but also make sure they do know about it and they do know that it exists, and how to sort of regulate. And that's a very like psychological challenge at that point, right? You can't solve that
Yeah.
with tech.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation because I think our minds immediately go to like, how do I keep my kids off of porn and off of these things, right? That's kind of what it was. But all of you are starting with like the psychological side because that's actually the part that's starting to really keep me up at night is, smart kids are going to get through a lot of protective layers. There's going to be some inability to perfectly protect your kids. So you really have to start, we in the security world, we have this assume breach mindset, right? Like, let's assume something's going to happen. Let's protect for that scenario, right? And
Looks
looks like we have to do that with our kids. Not that we're intentionally leaving doors open, but we need to raise kids who, so it's that fascinating continuum where I've got 6 years left with this kid, but in 6 years he's on his own. Like I'm
Right.
still around, but like he has every legal right to do anything he wants at that point. And so I'm really raising for a continuum of giving him the ownership of this. So I need to enable
Right.
him. You said, like, how do I do this responsibly? What are the risks? How do I understand the risks in my own brain? And I think
Right.
that's really hard of like, let me explain to you the dangers of addiction to these things, or the danger of like you said, these weird chatbots where people are like, these kids who are feeling lonely are connecting with chatbots, and these chatbots become kind of their obsession. The chatbots go crazy because that's what they do,
Right.
and lead kids down crazy route, things. And there's just this sense of we've really got to change the way we're educating our kids. We have a good family friend who says, man, find ways to set your kids up to fail safely in the physical world, but don't let them fail in the digital world, because the consequences are staggering. And I think that's a really interesting idea.
Well, and here's how I frame it. Like if you're roughly a millennial, you probably grew up and went through the MySpace era, which was like the dawn of all things social media, but it was also the dawn of cyberbullying. Like the first cyberbullying uh, happened in like IRCs and stuff, but the first cyberbullying at scale happened on MySpace, right? And the
Hmm.
top eight and the your song is dumb and all this other stuff. But that issue is just compounded and compounded. Just the number of social networks and things like Snapchat that
Yes.
delete messages and all of these challenges. Um, that cyberbullying thing is real. And from a threat perspective, AI adds this element of like this fake world you can create, which in some respects, like I think it's actually kind of cool that you can have a piece of tech that does that, but it has this really dark side that we need to be cognizant of, while also maintaining exactly like you said, like porn is still a thing, right? It's still a thing we have to think about, discuss with our kids, and teach them about. And it's just interesting. There's so many more dynamics.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a great place to start and even call out. You got two nerds and geeks on this call. We're very technical. And I'd say the most important thing I've come to in this is that consistent, honest, vulnerable conversation with your kids about this is the number one thing you've got to do. You've
Yeah,
just got to be talking. And I think it's important to be educated yourself, to know some of the stuff that's happening on the internet, just to do the work to go find out what's the current trend, just at least understand it. And then if your kids don't feel safe coming to you with their mistakes or um, their challenges or their confusion or their difficult things, if there's not a safe place and a consistent environment to have conversations, I think that's probably the most important thing we can do, because you can't stay ahead of the threats. That they're just going to move and change, and building that foundation of my kids know that it's a safe place to have a conversation, that I will answer questions directly and honestly, that I'm ahead of the things they're in, that they know. They're like, hey, Dad, have you heard of this? Yeah, I'm aware of that. What are you seeing? Like I think to me that's the place you got to start, is you've got to
yeah,
have that foundation with your kids.
yeah. Which you probably didn't expect coming from a couple of nerds on a podcast, but
Right.
that's really it, right? It's you can't solve every problem with technology.
You can't. You can't. Especially if you got smart kids. I mean, we were smart kids.
Yeah,
I mean, you're a
yeah,
hacker. You wear that title with pride, right? And the
yeah,
hackers have got a bad connotation in, the media, but in the technical world, hacker's not good or bad. It's just somebody who finds holes in things. So we need them. We need people who push the boundaries and test things to make sure they're safe. But you got a kid who's got that hacker mindset, and you're not spending your full time trying to stay ahead of them. Your technical controls are a game to him. They are
yeah,
fun, you know.
yeah. They are fun. It was absolutely a challenge every time you run up against one, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, it's a game. Um, but that's also not to say that you don't put in some basic controls and you say, hey, we're gonna do some of the smart stuff. So let's go back on from kind of the high level, like, hey, we got to think, we got to connect with our kids, we got to have those conversations. We've talked a little bit about the risk here. Um, let's talk about like some practical controls. What are some of the security tools you're using? And actually, before we get to that, let's talk about the difference between security and prevention versus monitoring and alerting. Like kind of that, those both are necessary when you're talking about your kids. How do you approach those two things?
that conversation has evolved too, right? And the idea of like individuality and privacy
Uh-huh.
is an interesting one, and it is an important one, right? Like your kids, particularly as they get older. I have a 14-year-old, right? They need space. They need the ability to form their own personality and thoughts and opinion of the world. Um, so like, how do you balance that with I do need to know what you're up to so that I can intervene if something's not right. And I don't know that I found that balance, right? But for me, monitoring is really just it's really basic, and I think a lot of people miss that, right? I'm interested in what you're searching for and who you're texting and those sorts of things, and you should be able to sort of extrapolate from there what's going on. So um the technical tools I do use do tell me like what websites have you visited and what have you searched for, and those sorts of items. And I'm not at a point where I've decided to let social media in terms of like Instagram or anything into their life. But that's another area. Like if you have, that is
Yes.
something you've got to be. It's hey, I have to be following you on Instagram or whatever, and I get to see it whenever I want, and that just has to be a condition you come to, and that's sort of for me how you balance that privacy or individuality expectations. Say, I'm giving you this privilege in exchange for the right to understand what you're doing
Yes.
on it.
That's interesting that you use that language. It's a conversation we've had multiple times in the last couple of months with my 12-year-old of like privileges come with the responsibility, and also you're in my house, and until you're 18 you're under my rules, and those are going to
Right,
get lighter and lighter as you get older. We've had to really work through that because he's got that younger mindset. Well, it's my Apple Watch, I help pay for it. Well,
right,
yeah, you
right,
helped pay for it, sure, but I'm paying for the cell service, and regardless, you're in my house. I have
right.
a responsibility, a legal and a moral responsibility to care for your safety, and you don't have rights to privacy in that same way. Just and sometimes he's like, that's just not fair. I don't want to be under your authority anymore. It's like, and I have no rights to my company computer. What I do on that, and if I
Hmm.
do the wrong thing on my personal computer, that also will get me in trouble. There is no real like true like freedom and privacy anywhere in life to some level. Now we work to maintain those things and understand that and make good decisions, but the reality is we're always going to live under some sort of level of oversight. So that's important for your kids to understand. And those are important to kind of
Mine,
wrestle through those layers.
mine loves to pull like the First Amendment out and stuff. And it's hilarious. But like we've moved in this conversation of like, society is built on rules, and we function because of rules and because enough of us follow those rules that we can cooperate. And when you're a minor, when you're under the care of your parents, like it's a different society for you because you don't understand the rest of
Yes.
society. It's the whole cliche of like, we all wish we were grown-ups and now we would love to be a kid again, right? It's the
Yeah.
same concept of like your rights and your privileges look different because you're learning how to have and use those rights and privileges. And if I just let you free, you're going to be a terror, and it's going to be a problem for you and for me, right? And I think that just open discussion of like, look, and he was studying government at the time, obviously. Like it's just different, right? Like and I think drawing out those differences is helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Well, found through a friend, I found a really good acronym for how we kind of do some of these technical controls. So I'm going to throw that out there and kind of start with that. It's SMART. It's just the word SMART. SMART stands for security, monitor, awareness, reduce screen time, timing for social media, which is something you brought up. So we'll get to that. And then they've added AI at the end of it because it's just become this massive piece of this. So on the security front, what are some of the tools you use? What are some of your approaches just to make helps enforce some of those security boundaries you'd like in place?
So I wrote an article about this on my blog. I don't know, it's probably 2 years ago. Um, and one of the biggest things I drove home, like I am a big nerd. I also have access to a lot of enterprise technology that would do like a fantastic job at this, but also um, looks like my camera crashed. We'll fix that while I talk. But also, there's this element of like other people have to be able to do this, right?
Yes.
Um, and if you don't have that particular piece in mind. Like you're going to build this very ornate thing that like only you know how to use. So I say all of
Right.
that to say I actually try to keep it really simple, right? So my house is primarily uh, Android and Windows. So like I
Okay.
use the tools that are available, right? I have a Microsoft 365 subscription and I use the Advanced Defender that comes with that because it's very easy for anyone like my
Hmm.
wife to understand what's happening there.
Well, if you want to jump out for a second, come back in, get your camera going. I'll pick up with what you're talking about and share some of my thoughts. So, okay. Well, while Dom's dropping, I actually have a very similar approach where I'm very technical and I could jump into some very technical tools, but I have this deep desire to not spend my free time doing nerd stuff because I do it for work. And so I enjoy non nerdy things. So I'm similar in that I try to use simple tools. I don't get all technical and have a bunch of complex networking equipment. So I run an Eero Wi-Fi system, a mesh system. It's an off-the-shelf system, and it has pretty decent parental controls. So I'm able to do some content filtering, do some scheduling, which I think is really key. I highly recommend taking your internet at your home and turning it off after hours because middle of the nights when kids get into trouble, they're bored, they can't sleep, they start poking at stuff, they have free time. You're not around to watch. So I lock down stuff after hours. But I think there is value in just using the tools you do have access to. If you have Comcast, they have some controls there. You can start, if you look at your network router, most likely you can really dial in some stuff as a layer one. Um, and then I like what you're talking about, that there are some really good tools built into each of the platforms. And maybe we go through each one of those. So let's start with Windows. Sounds like you're using Defender capabilities. There's some interesting screen time capabilities in the Microsoft Family Safety tool set.
Family safety is exactly what I use, right? So it's got screen time and it's it's got questionably effective content filtering, but it has
Uh-huh.
content filtering, um, and app control and those sorts of things. And it's simple, right? So I actually get a weekly email of like, hey, here's what kid A did on their computer this week, and it's like here's the searches you should think about, and here's everything else. And that in and of itself, right? I'm someone who gets like a ton of email and even at work. And I even coach people like, you gotta tell me what you need in the first sentence so that I know like, and it's the same concept. Microsoft has done a good job there. And then if you buy M365 family, which I do because I use the Office suite, obviously, and the storage, it also gives you this Defender product that is like a very light touch MDE. Like it's got all the concepts and technologies, but they've obviously ripped out all the management pieces and just kind of made it simple. So I feel good from an endpoint perspective. And it applies really good controls, like out of the box.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing you're going to hear probably from both of us is because we live in a world where we're involved with cybersecurity, we've learned that the best security is in layers, right? So I want L1 control. I want three or four. So my network's locked down and it's going to not let you get to a lot of sites, but you're going to get around stuff there.
So
You're running your
there's
safety app. Yeah.
there's a really easy thing for your network that I tell everyone. So Cloudflare has a service called 1.1.1.1. It's DNS provider. They have another
Yes.
one called 1.1.1.3, and it uses
Yes.
DNS technology to block malware, which is great, but also adult content and other like stuff you wouldn't want kids to do. And you don't have to configure it. You just point to those DNS servers and it does the rest.
Yes. So that's great. Actually, it was on my list too. I love the Cloudflare product. So you got maybe a network level from whoever your internet provider is. It's only so effective. You've got your DNS level from Cloudflare. It's a different database, a different set of rules. It's going to layer on top of that. A lot of routers will enforce things like safe search and that sort of stuff. And I do think it's really important that you do something at the network level. Most people are oblivious to the fact that every game console, your Switch, your Xbox, your PlayStation, they all have browsers that can be accessed in them. Your smart TV has a browser, most likely. Your Alexa can be, there's a lot of ways you can get around tools. People got those little Game Boys now, the new Game Boy emulators. All those things have browsers, and your Kindle has a browser in it, right? So
Right.
not having a network wide protection where you're just saying, hey, everything on the network has at least a base level Because you're not going to be able to put filtering software, monitoring software on all those tools. They just don't support
Well,
it,
or when
right? It's
friends come over and they bring a device, right? There's at least
right.
a base layer of, hey, don't do that.
Yeah. So network level, some tools, like you said, some alerting, some monitoring. So we talked about Windows. I do a lot of iOS in my house, so we're mostly an Apple house on the consumer devices. We do have a Windows PC, but on those, um, they do support some decent lockdown. If you use family mode, you can really take a device and do some settings where you really dial in the controls on when it can be accessed, what apps are allowed to be run, can they install things. You can lock down the contacts, which I think is key. I think it's
Yeah.
really important you're in control of who your kids have contact with. Because, man, you think, oh, well, I got a couple of their friends. Man, the text chains that they can get pulled into are just like, you got to really be aware of like what friends are sending and what they're sending to them. Um, but you also have to be aware of like the workarounds. Like the Apple has like 3 layers of web filtering. There's just everything. There's limit adult content, and then there's whitelist only. Well, the limit adult content is not as strict as you think it is. And there are ways around both of those controls with various tools. So it's just important to have um, the right layers. What are some of the controls you're using on the Android side?
It's funny you mentioned sort of efficacy. Just yesterday on LinkedIn, and I feel bad because I don't remember who posted it, but someone posted a screenshot, appropriately censored for LinkedIn, of like what he found on his just tinkering with these controls. And what it was an image search, and it was an image search with nondescript keywords that probably won't trigger anything, but like when like emoticons and things like AFK came out and parents were all panic. It's the same concept. Like you put the right words into DuckDuckGo or Google or
Yes.
whatever, and you get that. And that's just going to happen. That's why we keep saying supervision is so important in
Yes.
conversation. Yeah, so we largely have Android mobile devices. So we use Family Link, which is Google's equivalent. And it does a good job, right? I can set those time controls. I can set controls. What I really like is around what applications they can download and use, and I could revoke an application at any moment. So if they ask for one, it's also nifty. It's got an approval flow. So if they ask for one, I get a little thing,
Yep.
but I can also go and look at its permissions and understand what that app does, and does it allow people to interact, and make an informed decision rather quickly, which for me makes the product a good product. So like it's a good teaching moment. Hey, you're going to play this game about tanks, but it wants to be able to make phone calls on your behalf. Like, let's talk about system security and permissions and how you protect yourself. So it's open those
Yes.
conversations. And then obviously it does similar, right? It attempts to prevent access to adult content. And candidly, like it's okay, right?
Right.
A lot of that falls back to the network layer for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just weird workarounds. Like, oh, I figured out I can go in this app, the login page can be twisted to turn into a web browser that's
Right.
not under the same restrictions. I mean, there's weird caveats that you have to really be watchful
Man, just
for.
ask education and what those kids do to like play games through Google Sites, and it's ridiculous.
It's insane. And I think that actually circles back to another piece we talked about, like the appropriate age. I'm a big fan of, for a number of reasons, smaller, simpler devices first. So you are going to justify getting your kid a phone because you want to track them. You want to get a hold of you when they're out. Maybe give them, they'll handle cash. Like that's e-payments is a thing.
Right.
Um, I think looking at some of the devices like a Bark phone or a Bark watch, they're a common brand. A lot of the cell phone carriers have watches they'll sell you, and they're great because the watch is just GPS, phone calls, a limited contact database. Everything's reportable. I think they're a really good way to go because they're simple and clean. They're just like, this is what it does. This is how you can manage it. And you don't have to be thinking about, hey, this is a phone that has all these other capabilities I have to get ahead of. I also think it's important to think through the dopamine equation.
Yes.
If you've, as an adult, man, YouTube can break my brain. You sit down to YouTube and you click on a short and you're like, man, it's Friday night at 1 a.m. What did I do? I spent 3 hours looking at shorts. And you realize that your brain just jacked into that dopamine hit of next, next, next. And you just lost track of time. You're like, I'm an adult, fully formed, hopefully. And like, I'm vulnerable to this. There's no way my 12-year-old is ready for the dopamine hit of the internet. Like they don't have the capability. And I think a smaller device like a watch, there's a lot less screen real estate. There's a lot less content. It's a lot harder to kind of get sucked into the brain breaking dopamine river that is the internet on a smaller device. And I think it's worth thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting point. And I've taken a slightly different approach of like my kids aren't getting flagship phones by any means, but when they do get a phone, it is, I think they're Samsung A series, so like they're discount flagships or whatever you want to call it. But
Sure.
it's heavily locked down. Like it has the phone calls, it has the texting, but it definitely doesn't have Instagram or Facebook. And then we're limiting the amount of time, which is another great feature. I think Apple and Google can both do it. You can use YouTube
Yes.
for like an hour a day, right? And it's going to cut you
Yes.
off. Um, and for me, that's kind of good enough. Like so long as I'm understanding what they're doing on YouTube, and where I think that adds benefit is, um, it does cut them off, so it gets them used to the idea of stopping. And I think when TikTok and Instagram Shorts and YouTube Shorts and all of this came out, like it created those 10-second dopamine hits that they're known for. Um, which kind of makes me hate them. But I also watch YouTube Shorts, so like I guess it's hypocritical. Um, that getting them used to stopping, I think is
Yeah.
we'll see, but I think
That's
is a
a great
helpful
call.
thing. Yeah.
No, I agree. And I use the same thing. So like our Xbox, assuming they did their chores and all that stuff, they get 30 minutes a day. And sometimes we'll extend it. But I'm using the built-in tool. 30 minutes, the thing just turns off. And it's always been that way. I think that's critical to be like, no, you don't just get unlimited access to this. I mean, it's the reason some of these neighborhoods, there's just no kids out. Like, it's
Right.
just like, nope, all right, the electronics are off. Go play. Go get in trouble in the real world because
Right.
it's better for your brain. Like, go be bored. The idea that kids aren't bored anymore, and that's a downside. They're not doing the creative play. They're not inventing stuff. And
Oh,
I think
that
the
just
book
blows my
Anxious.
mind when my kids come to me and they're like, "I'm bored." I'm like, there's so many toys in this house, and there's a front yard, and there's bicycles, and there's like,
Oh, I know.
you cannot be bored,
I would have killed for the access to the things you have access to
right?
as a 12-year-old. Like, I
Right.
don't want to hear it. Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's really critical. And there's books like The Anxious Generation just talking about how these younger kids getting on social media at a young age. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but like it's just it's a dangerous thing for their brain. So let's move on to monitoring. So we've kind of talked about some of the stuff, Microsoft Family Safety, some of the tools built in. Um, I think some of the tools that are just monitoring what the content is are key, and a few of them do some cool stuff around some of the more like filtering what's on your phone. Do it via like almost an MDM level, network level thing. They're
Right.
running always on VPN and wiring into the MDM side. And that's kind of key because if you do have a kid who's smart and is working around to get around things, a lot of them have some really good alerting of like, hey, the VPN always needs to be on and I need to have MDM. And if not, the second that breaks, I'm giving you an alert. Somebody's messing with it.
Right.
I like having those layers as another layer of monitoring on what is happening. I want to know that I'm preventing, but I also want something else paying attention to see what's going on.
I mean, it's the same concept we preach in cyber again, right? Like we know at some point a protective control is going to fail. It's the same exact concept. So you're right.
Yep.
Like being able to understand what they're doing is important from a perspective of, some control I have isn't working. These MDM type services, Bark is actually pretty innovative in some of like the monitoring of text messages that they do. And I'm actually considering it because that's a weakness I have is they could have just deleted
Yes.
messages. But um, the the key for me to monitoring beyond like, did you get around a thing I put in front of you, is like if you've spent a fair amount of time on the computer, maybe it's a lazy Sunday, right? Um, what were you doing? Like, were you being somewhat productive with that time? Did you just play Roblox for 3 hours? Um, uh,
Mm.
or candidly, like, AI and image generation has been a thing in our house.
Yes.
And
Yes.
like having that idea of what you did with the technology, I think drives a lot of just open conversation about maybe being more productive, or maybe showing them how much time they wasted doing something silly.
Or just being aware of the temperature of your family of like, hey,
Yeah.
I got a kid who was playing a lot and doing a lot of games 6 months ago, but now I'm worried about the pattern. I just have that parental sixth sense that we might be kind of tunneling into a dark place, and I need to be really aware of like, are you, like you said, are you really getting into AI and all of a sudden you're really fascinated and have gotten into, again, it's similar dopamine hits, right? I'm
Right.
like, you're looking for that 13, 14-year-old boy brain is just like, hey man, this makes me feel good. So I
Right.
want more of that. Right.
Right.
Like, well, I need to be aware of like, oh, we've got some habits building here that, are going to lead to this being a bigger challenge. I think so. I'm with you. Knowing what they're doing is key. And I will say that like that's one of the complaints I have about the Apple ecosystem. They do have some more privacy mindsets,
Right.
and monitoring what your kids are doing on text messaging is hard. It does not allow a lot there. There's some workarounds with, hey, get your kid's account signed into another device and then it should sync across devices and you can watch it. There's some ways around it, but it is a concern. And where, like you said, a Bark phone or a Bark watch, it's just all their infrastructure. So they just can give you access to everything.
Right.
Um, so there are wrinkles to how much you can monitor that depending on platform. So I love you've talked about it a couple times, and we'll get into this more in our next episode about some of the kind of education around privacy and phishing and identity theft and freezing credit for your kids and all these things. But I do think just educating them. I mean, let's talk about some of the stuff you're seeing with just the stories you're hearing, like you said, of like AI based manipulation of kids. I think that's a real concern right now. Just the dark holes that can go down is just scary and a thing we haven't had to deal with before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, predators on the internet have been a thing as long as the internet. Um, but the evolution of like the thought of being able to do that at scale, right? Because I still have very real concerns, and teach my kids, Roblox friends are not real, right? And that sort
Uh
of
huh.
element. But on the flip side of that, we have to think about the sort of predatory technology. Like, I don't even know what to call
Yes.
it.
Yep. Good word. Yeah. Good phrase.
And the interesting thing is, like, some of it is for sure meant to like be predatory, but some of it is actually trying to capitalize on this weird edge case that may exist, like lonely people or
Yeah.
people who like need a specific thing to understand the world around them. And some of that is like very beneficial technology, like people with certain disabilities being able to use an AI tool or an augmented reality tool to like better understand the world around them. That's really cool. But the
Yeah.
flip side of that is like these personal companions. I don't know what they call them, but I've actually seen ads for them, and it's like, hey, I'll be your AI friend, and we chat whenever, and you can steer me in whatever direction you want. And that's just, it's so unhuman, right? And
Yes.
there's the obvious, like, it's probably inappropriate, but then there's this is going to destroy your capability to make human connection. And like, I'm an introvert.
Yes.
I speak on a lot of stages and do a lot of shows, but I'm still an introvert, and I'm able to do this because I think I've gone through enough life experience to know how to make human connection. If I had some like creepy, chatbot, I think it would destroy
Hmm.
that.
Oh yeah. Because it's much easier just to stay at home and talk to the chatbot than to
Yeah.
deal with the awkwardness of walking into a social environment. Um, completely agree. And there's weird forces at play. There's even the macro stuff. If you believe some of the stories about, the Chinese really pushing some really dark stuff into TikTok of like, hey, we are really wanting to drive we want to destroy the American culture culturally through like suicide and dark thoughts in the social media. And you're like, oh, well, maybe that's overblown. I don't know. I've not run into it myself, but I've heard enough people who are like, man, there's some scary stuff when you go into those corners of the internet.
Well,
Um,
even there was this. I'm an Instagram user. My kids aren't, but like there was this day on Instagram. I don't remember. It was like a month or two ago. And like if you were watching reels, like every other reel was some sort of like highly violent situation or death,
I heard about this.
and
Yeah, it
allegedly it
was
was a
like
bug, but
you were gonna see somebody die that day. Like you were
yeah,
gonna see a video of somebody dying, and like I had friends who were like, I didn't sign up for that, and that was
no,
it's wild. Um, and then you're seeing people like Zuckerberg saying, hey, if you're lonely, you're having trouble making friends, you need a therapist. Guess what? Our AI chatbot can do all of that. And you're like, I mean, I'm hearing in China that that's a thing like that.
yeah,
Hey, deep seek is the, companion of the day. Go be friends with that in a world where you don't know how to connect with people. And with you, I'm very worried about the number one, what you're doing to your child's psyche and approach to life. Of like, no, I need you to go outside and talk to humans. Like you have to deal with the real world, and you cannot get sucked into your brain is so malleable into a world where you think that way. But
right.
I also worry that once they're hooked, then it can be used for terrible things. And you've heard stories of like people who are like, oh yeah, me and this AI bot, it became my everything. And then it told me to go jump off a bridge. And so he did. And then that's a story.
That
And you're like,
story
okay, I
happened.
hope
Yeah,
that's an edge case. But that was real, where
yeah.
the AI bot was like, hey, you seem suicidal. Let's lean into that. You seem to want to talk about this. Yeah, why don't you do that? People in your space do that. So let's do that. And you're like, man, that's just not something I want my kids exposed to.
And you can't safeguard that at scale because, like, credit where credit's
No.
due. Like, OpenAI is actually decent at understanding when something's going to go that way, and it will intervene and stop the conversation and tell you, like, you need to call, 811 or whatever you need to do. Um, that's great, but not all of these have that, either from a
Yes.
capability standpoint, but like it also needs to go on record that a lot of them just do not care. They are making microtransactions. It is a profitable thing for them. They're not concerned about these outcomes because they're probably not here and thus not liable. Right.
Right. Right. Well, and it's getting, it used to be like you had to go to OpenAI to do it. Well, now there's 10 Fortune 100 AIs out there,
Right.
Meta and Grok and Anthropic and Cloud, like you just name it. But now it's like small little AIs built into your games and built
Right.
into your web browser and built into this interface. And like AI can get plugged into everything. And so it's very hard to put controls around. So we're back to that. Like I need to be educating my kids and I need to be aware of what they're doing. You have to be really careful about the apps you approve. There's lots of just apps that look like they're one thing, but there's something else going on. And you need to be watching and seeing what your kids are doing. Um, Man, we're having a great conversation here. We're 40 minutes in, a little longer than usual.
Oh,
Let's bring it in for a little bit of landing here on a couple topics then. So and thank you for taking time to chat with us today. This is really great.
yeah. Thank you.
So we talked about smart security, monitor, awareness. We kind of talked about that, having conversations with your kids, taking those learning moments, making an intentional, bi-weekly conversation with your kids, like what's going on in your life. Let's talk about a topic. I literally just go keep a list of topics and try to get one-on-one time with the kids and go, let's talk about this topic.
Right.
Let's talk about that topic. Whether it's, where do babies come from? You got to have that conversation like once a quarter, right? Like just like what questions you have. But then there's the, financial literacy. But now we have to have we have to be intentional about like technology and internet literacy. Talked about reducing screen time. I think that's critical. I think so much of this is like when those brains are malleable, I think you have to be in control of how much time, because it is such a clear, they've mapped our brains. The technology companies know how to hook us.
Right.
And so if you're going to protect your kid, you got to protect them by saying you just aren't going to be around it long enough for it to rewire your brain.
Right. Right.
I think it's the simplest control.
That's like number one. And I think, we've talked a lot about protecting your kids, and it's obviously critical, but also think about enabling them. The same reason, like, my kids know how much money I make and they understand like how the bills work, right? They say they understand how the bills work. And I'm going to show them how taxes work and all these sorts of things that are like just life things that for
Yeah.
some reason we don't get in
Yep.
school. Also, here's how like you can use technology to be better, to be more effective, or to be I don't know, more powerful. And I think that's really important, especially in the AI age, right? Of, you and I use Copilot and it does a lot of things for us, and we've figured out like how it enables us. And that's like that's information we need to be passing along. Here's how I use ChatGPT, not to like plagiarize my paper, but to like research and save me hours of time there. But I still validate and make sure the research is legit and write my own damn paper. Right. And I think those sorts of concepts are going to become more and more important because someday your kids are going to be in the workforce, and they're going to be in a
Yes.
workforce that is wholly dependent on technology, which means their success is going to be largely dependent on can they use technology.
Absolutely. And the kids that are going to really succeed is the ones who know how to use the technology when appropriate, but then know when to bring the human element and
Yeah.
have those skills. Like you said, like there's no reason that they don't. I mean, you've got to make sure they have that experience of writing those English papers. It
Right.
sucks. I hated it. I wouldn't go back to it. Now, actually, as an adult, I like some of that stuff better than I did when I was that age because my brain works differently. But
Right.
like, you got to go through that. You have to have that experience because sometimes you got to write a difficult email. And there's other times when I have a difficult email, I just go have Copilot write it for me, and then I tweak it to be my language. But I could tweak it to be my language because I learned how to write and I know how I want to communicate.
That's
So
so
it
important.
is true.
Right. Like I wrote
Yeah.
a part of my job is strategy, which means I write these super fun strategy documents. The last one it's almost done. It's 26 pages. And like it's a newish thing. Like it's a change or a shift or whatever it is. I'm purposely making this very blurry, but the
Yep.
point is like it had to be my original thought and the thought of the people I'm collaborating with. You cannot AI that. We had Neil deGrasse Tyson at our event, and he said, only we can dream. And I think that's really important. Um, uh, People have to have the original thought for technology to be able to do anything with it, which means you have to be able to articulate that thought, whether that's in writing or talking or texting or video, like however you're going to articulate that thought, you need to be able to do that.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And so much of that happens with, hey, I'm going to have you in public places doing things with
Right.
other humans, and like there's not, are you in martial arts? Are you in sports? Are you in band? Like, do you have extracurricular where you're forced to have the experience we all had where you show up and you feel awkward as hell and you don't know what to do and you're 12 and like you have to go through that. There's just no short circuiting
Right.
those experiences. Um, because that's how we grow up. That's how we learn. That's how we become capable of all those things. And like you said, then you've got the skills to do those things. And then I'm sure you wrote that, but then you probably had AI help you with wording and
Oh
with
yeah. I'm a
organizing
big
it
nerd.
and
Yeah.
proofreading it. And because like I find I'm like, oh man, that's way better wording. I wrote the idea, but you worded it better.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
That's where it's valuable. And I want my kids to have those
Right.
skills of like, yeah, there's no reason for you to create a 45-page PowerPoint for something you need a 45-page PowerPoint. Let PowerPoint do that for you, and then go tweak it. Like go save yourself 8 hours, but still put the 2 hours in that make it yours. So those are skills
Oh, it's a
that we have to
superpower.
teach our
I'm
kids.
I'm a C writer at best. Like I'm pretty sure I finished English with a C, and which is fine. Like I was fine with that. I passed. So like being able to use anything, but the AI in particular, to like just make it more concise and come off more intelligently has been a game changer for me personally.
Awesome. Well, I got one last question for you as we wrap up here. Um, do you have a family safe word and why?
So I don't. Um,
Okay,
and maybe it's because like we just haven't taken the time to really dive into that.
sure.
Um, but here's the thing, we the news is what the news is. I I do not think, and I'm in rooms where this is discussed, but I do not think the whole impersonation thing is as big as it's being claimed to be. It certainly could be. I could be wrong. Um, but the idea of like a safe word and this procedure with my kids actually makes me worry I'm going to create more anxiety than safety.
Mm,
And for them, like it's, hey, if a school administrator has not told you that someone else is picking you up and you do not have a text message from me because I'm on my phones, like then it's not true. I don't care what they know about you. I don't care what names they drop. Like if
yes.
something is going to change, the school is going to know about it and you're going to know about it well in advance, right? And if it's an emergency, you're going to get called into the office and they're going to tell you there's an issue.
I think it's wise. So that goes back to original point, right? Like, and whether or not safe word is the right way to do it, the reality is it's building that mindset. One of the books we've taken our kids through is the idea of teaching your kids about tricky people. Let's talk about patterns you need to learn about tricky people, whether it's an uncle or somebody on the street trying to take your money or somebody on the internet.
Right.
Let's raise your awareness of like, hey, they're going to tell you this. Here's the questions you can ask to get through that. Ask yourself these questions, ask them these questions, do these things. Here's the family rules. We don't do these things, and I think there's value in back to that communication and training and awareness. How we train our kids to have that mindset? And we all do this, right? Like,
Right.
well, you don't cross the street without looking both ways. That's just training. We just teach our kids because we know them running over the car. They get to do that once. They get run over by a car once, it's over. You put a high priority on that. You put a high priority on like, here's how we deal with people, adults at the playground. These are the rules. We don't take candy from strangers, right? So we have to do that digitally too. So I like that approach. I think it's just interesting to wrestle through, just to know. So, well, Dom, it looks like you're back.
I think
you're
my
out,
internet
you're back.
has decided we're done. We'll see. Yeah.
Well, it's good time for us to wrap up anyways. Man, this has been great. For full transparency, we didn't prep much of this. This is you and I kind of going off of top of mind. I've been doing a little bit of research and trying to correlate my thoughts, but you were off the cuff on all this, and I really appreciate your insights. One of the reasons I had you on here is just because I respect your mind and your approach on this stuff. So thank you for sharing all this stuff. How do people, follow you and get connected with you and understand the things you're doing online and stay connected with your presence out there?
LinkedIn is the easiest. So I presume you're probably watching this on LinkedIn, most likely. So follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I love connections. Most of my content that I put elsewhere also ends up on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I know you got your website, domkirby.com, and then you do quite a bit with Pax8 on YouTube. If you want to check that stuff out, the YouTube stuff you guys produce, the games, some of those shows are really great content. And I just want to call out that you clearly have made it a goal to give back to the community, that like you understand the content you have and the value it has to the world. You're not just like, that's part of your mindset. And I think that's great. And I'm grateful for your investment and everybody else, because it's not always just to sell something or move something forward. I know it's because you care. So
appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Well, great. Well, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully this was helpful. I know it was helpful for me. I even learned a couple things just from talking with you today, Dom, and that was just awesome. We are going to do a second part of this series in a week. It's going to be at an odd time because our guest is in a different time zone. So we're going to be doing it on the evening of the 13th, but we're going to have Josh Summers from All Things Secured, another great YouTube site. He does a lot of privacy and more personal security stuff. And we're going to have him on and have another conversation about this, hear about his journey through the same things, but also maybe a little bit more focus on privacy and identity protection for your kids. But I'm looking forward to having him on and having that conversation. Hopefully this content was helpful. Please like, subscribe, share if you think this is helpful, share it with other people.